Joining me now, Marc Short. He's the former chief of staff to Vice President Mike Pence, also a CNBC contributor. It's good to see you. Welcome. It's nice
Thanks,
timing
Scott.
to have you.
Thanks, Scott. Good to be here.
I mean, you've been pretty critical, even publicly, of these tariffs. What'd you make of the court ruling?
Well, I think the court ruling Friday night was a good win for taxpayers. I think that everyone knows that in Article 1, Section 8 of the Constitution, that our founders clearly designed that the ability to tax the American people belongs to Congress and all of their representatives. And as your viewers know, a tariff is a tax, and it's a tax on American companies and American consumers. I think that big picture, this president and the people in his administration, they're not really fans of wealth of nations. They don't view it as if a free and fair trade, both sides win. They view it as if we're buying goods from any foreign country, that is a net loss. And so therefore they want to eliminate trade deficits, and they're going to use every tool that they can. But I think, what does this mean for markets, Scott? I think the reality is that the president is going to appeal this. I think it's likely the Supreme Court takes it up. It's an important decision. That's going to take several months. And so these tariffs are going to remain in effect. In the meantime, the president will probably ask his team to go back and do investigations under 232 and 301 to begin doing unfair trade practices, national security tariffs, like he did in the first administration. IEEPA, which he used in this case, has never been used for tariffs. It was a statute brought up 50 years ago that doesn't even mention tariffs. And so I think this was always an extraordinary stretch. It was mentioned on occasion in the first administration, but quickly dismissed by staff as something that was far beyond the reach of what the statute allowed. And so I don't think it's a surprise where the courts have landed, but I think you're going to continue to see the protectionist agenda push forward under other avenues.
But you say it could take months now that it's going to go to the court. You just heard, I presume, Eamon's reporting that the president just now in the Oval Office said he's going to ask for a fast track to the Supreme Court. So maybe we're not going to have to wait as long as we once thought.
Well, I'm not a lawyer, but I still think it'll take a little while for the court to decide if they want to take the case. They'll announce taking the case, they'll announce a hearing, and then they'll take time to issue a ruling. So I still think it's going to be several months down the road, Scott, before there's actually a ruling from the Supreme Court, which allows him to keep these IEEPA tariffs in place. But again, it's not as if the Supreme Court rules the same way the appeals court did, or the original International Court of Trade also ruled in the same way. It's not as if this is going to end. They're going to find other avenues to pursue tariffs on the American people.
But do you think there are more rank and file Republicans in Congress now who are actually hoping that the Supreme Court rules against the president? Because in some degree, as you lay out, they want their power back, so to speak.
Well, I think partially, Scott. I do think that they've had their power. They've just been reluctant to speak out. I think the Republicans don't want to go against President Trump's economic agenda. They don't want to draw the president's ire. They don't want to draw primary opponents. And so, by and large, they've been fearful to speak up, to exert the power that has always been theirs. And so it's not as if it would be restored. Frankly, it is theirs today. And I think that if you pursue the president's very protectionist trade policy, there's always been an avenue of doing that in coordination with Congress. It's not as if you can't do it, even if I might disagree with it. There is a legal way to do it, but it is not a legal way just to exert and say the executive branch has this unilateral authority. That's never the way it was designed by our founders.
You suggest that we're already seeing the repercussions from these tariffs as they filter their way through the economy. In what sense?
Well, I think that to the president's credit, in passing the tax bill and his deregulatory agenda, lowering energy prices, you've not seen a huge spike in inflation. It is a little bit higher, but it's not been a huge spike in that number. I think markets are obviously at all-time highs. But I think some of our biggest retailers in the country have said that they pre-purchased inventory in anticipation of the tariffs. And many of that is running out at this point. So you're beginning to see more and more companies announce increase in prices. That's the biggest retailers. The small businesses are the ones who have felt the impact most, and their bankruptcies are at all-time highs, or at least the highest they've been in 10 years for small companies right now. And I think you're also beginning to see it, Scott, really in the labor market and softness there, because companies are so uncertain as to what is going to be happening in this trade agenda. It makes it very difficult to invest long-term, which really hurts hiring and employment.
What about the bigger picture geopolitical issues? As you saw over the weekend, really, we seem to be in a posture right now that is attempting to alienate India in at least some degree. and then what the fallout of that might be by driving them closer to the Chinese or the Russians?
Yeah, it's a great question, Scott. I think in the first administration, President Trump was very, strategic in using his tariffs targeted toward China and aligning the rest of the globe against China, particularly in the Pacific. I think this unilateral approach of tariffing all of our allies and foes alike, whether or not it's Japan or Korea or India, in many cases, you're forcing them, who are traditional allies, into the hands of our adversaries who can get better trade deals. And so I think, I don't think Modi should be partnering with authoritarian dictators as he has apparently over the weekend. But, Donald Trump went to India with First Lady Melania Trump in his first administration, and there was great warmth, and there was an overture to work with India. As India now moves into the hands of Xi and Putin, I think that's a big geopolitical risk for the United States. And I think it's really driven by this tariff agenda.
Just expanding on that, Goldman Sachs's chief operating officer, president, John Waldron, wrote an interesting op-ed in the FT not that long ago, talking about how the relationship between the United States and China has changed dramatically, even though we're still trying to feel out where it's all going. That was once built on cheap prices and convenience, now for supply chain issues and national security has morphed into something entirely different. And companies are taking notice of that in the way that they're thinking about how they invest into that nation. I'm wondering how you see that, and whether you agree that it's a permanent change, that we're not going to view the Chinese as the place to just get cheap stuff and get it quickly and easily anymore.
I think it's likely a permanent change. Again, I think to President Trump's credit, it was one of the ways he changed the national consensus on China in his first administration. And I think China does pose an enormous risk and is a big adversary. And I think it was actually an effort to move manufacturing, if not back to the United States, then at least to partners in the Asia Pacific, again, whether India or Vietnam. And that was a healthy development, I think, of the isolating of China. I do worry a little bit, Scott, in that despite the rhetoric, I think the actions in the second administration have actually been a little bit softer toward China. And that sounds weird because the rhetoric is still strong. But when you look at the administration's position on TikTok, or you look at the administration questioning troops in Korea, or not allowing the Taiwan president to land in the United States, there's been a lot of actions where I think the president is very anxious to get a trade summit with President Xi, that his actions actually have been a lot softer toward China in the second administration than they were in the first administration.
But I mean, we're also seeing, and part of the point of the op-ed was that companies have fully rethought the way they're investing in the region and in China in general, and for what they used to invest on behalf of, and what they thought they would get out of that investment has all but dried up because things have changed so dramatically.
Well, again, if you view it as a national security risk, and I think you would look at that as a positive for America long term, that is what you want the market reaction to be to your policies. And I think that again, is a way that President Trump changed consensus in his first administration. I'm not as confident he's pursuing those same policies today. I think instead, as I said, you're pushing some of our traditional allies to want to make trade deals with China right now.
Marc, we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Marc Short.